So to complete this portion of the assignment, you're going to come to this page and you're going to find a asset, a digital composite of geometric volumes that you can actually rotate in space. These objects are already set up, they're already lit, so they have cast shadows, they look believable, and you'll have the ability to rotate them, to direct them in whichever way or angle that you want to have your composition. One of the things that you want to be mindful of is the perspective. You want to select an angle that you believe you'll be able to execute well. So once you've selected that, then you can move on and begin your drawing. Next thing we want to do is plot that composition onto your 11 by 14 sheet of paper. So we want to group things into one big shape so that we can compose that big shape within this compositional space. So we want to know our limits. So the way that I like to approach it is to do kind of a gesture drawing of everything as one shape. So we have 5 objects, and those objects I want to just group them together as one. So I'm going to go for the tallest one to know how far I have to go from the top, and then come down to the bottom of the one that's closest to me. And if I'm looking at my reference, that is going to be the sphere. So I'm going to sort of imagine that sphere being somewhere here, that looks like a hexagonal prism somewhere over here, and I think the top of that pyramid is somewhere there. Goes down like that, and then the box maybe. So here I'm just kind of feeling things out. I don't know exactly if everything's going to fit in this exact location, but the idea is that I'm trying to feel out roughly where I think things may go. And I'm doing this using the 6H pencil, so that if I end up not liking it, I can erase it easily. The other thing that I'm doing as I'm doing this is looking at proportions. How big is this cube relative to the sphere? The sphere is shorter in height, and relative to this cube, it's somewhere over here, right? I want to make sure that this cube kind of fits there. So first we want to fill things out, and then we're going to be more precise or specific and start measuring. So the other thing that we want to include is the cast shadows. So that cast shadow of this pyramidal shape or form kind of comes up like that, comes down, and if I look across from the corner of this cube, this little peak here of that shape is a little lower than that, and it angles, and then it comes down. What that means is that the light is coming in this direction and is causing a shadow opposite of that. Okay, the end of the table and that fabric that is on there, the table appears to be at a 1-point perspective, and that table is going to be something that's going to help us find our eye level. So by looking at that eye level, and I'll point that out on the reference photo that I'm using, seems to be somewhere up here. So when I take this line of where that fabric is and the edge of the table, where those lines converge, that's going to be our eye level. The other way to look for our eye level is to look at the objects themselves and see what you can see on top of and what you can't see on top of. So based on the shape of that cylinder that's back here somewhere, I get the sense that it's somewhere here. To know for sure, we can just track these lines and get those orthogonal lines from a large object, and it'll tell us that. That means that if our eye level is there, our table can be at a 1-point perspective, our cube can be at a 2-point perspective, and the hexagonal prism is also at a 2-point perspective. Because it's receding away from us, we don't see the face of it, we see the corner. So this corner is telling me that. Right, so going back to this drawing, I'll speed things up a little bit. I see this side of this box. I want to make sure that all vertical lines in this case stay vertical. So when you're selecting your angle, your point of view on this source, make sure that you're in a location where you see these vertical lines perfectly straight, and that'll make things a lot easier to navigate. If I project this line up, this cube does not line up with the peak of this pyramid. Peak of the pyramid is somewhere here. Comes down. I'm just gonna follow that. Another thing that you want to always try to avoid are tangents. If I know where I start and I know where to end, so I see this end of the box and the corner of this pyramid is somewhere there, I can easily make a line. If I know where I'm starting and I know where I'm ending, it makes it easier to travel instead of trying to follow and hope that I get there. Looking at this, somewhere here, and I can see a little bit of on top of that box. So then this point will connect to that. And this one to that point. So I have a general idea of this pyramid. I can get very particular, but I think it's not necessary. So now that I have these, I want to make sure that I check which one is taller, the pyramid or the box. From my reference, I can see that the pyramid is just a little bit taller than the box. So I measure this, measure that. It seems to be true, right? So the pyramid is this much taller than the box. So I measure this box, take that measurement somewhere there, and based on my reference, that seems to be true. Before I get into any more shadows, I want to make sure that I get the other objects. So then I look at where this cylinder intersects this box. Maybe I'm going to make a little adjustment to the box. I see where the ball gets close to it, and like we did before in the practice, easiest way to put a ball in here is to make a nice square. So however tall that is, or wide that is, that'll help me make pretty easy circle, right? Bisect this. A sphere is essentially a circle, has no corners. So by doing this, I get a little bit better circle. Start here, ride that edge, ride that edge, and that'll prevent me from making any lips. And it doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to add value to it. Right? And then I look at where this cylinder, because it's behind it, I want to see where it touches this this sphere. Seems to be somewhere there. When I'm doing cylinders, especially in this situation, I like to go with the line straight across, and that line goes through the middle of the cylinder top, the top of the cylinder, so the oval that I see on top. If that goes through the middle, and I'm in this sort of arrangement, what is closest to me is this front part. So that means this area will be longer, this area will be shorter, and it curves, and it curves. So just like this, it rides the edge a little bit, This will ride that edge a little bit to make sure that you don't have a corner here that pinches too much. And it'll also ensure that if this is longer than this, that already kind of takes in consideration the idea of perspective. Right, so I overshot a little bit there, a little too tall. This I want to simplify it into a box from here, roughly on there. So I want to imagine the corner of this object and draw the general shape of it, especially because it's a difficult object. So the general shape of it, and then I can get specific. So make sure that I have the perspective receding back. I look at the angles at the top, and I'm imagining this goes back into a vanishing point over here, kind of following this same idea of that. Right? So I can have multiple vanishing points all in the same eye level, each object having its own rules of perspective. So long as they all share the same eye level, we'll perceive them to be inhabiting the same space. So bisect this. It's about here. About there. That bit should go there. And if it's a little bit off, that's perfectly fine. We're not trying to be perfectionists here. We're trying to make a drawing that looks believable, right? So in this case, we do want to start erasing some things just to have it make sense to us. I'll cut this corner off. Now I can draw the shapes of shadow. This one doesn't have much of a cast shadow from this angle. The sphere does. This area is the shape of shadow. The light is coming in that direction, kind of low. So it's creating a cast shadow on this cylinder and then also on this cube. And on the 3D reference, it shows that cast shadow coming from here, but in reality, it has to be attached to the object itself. Draw it how you see it on the reference, but in real life, it would be attached to the object that it's coming from, not behind it, like the way that this is showing. Top of this, there's a cast shadow behind this. Making sure that this is perfectly straight, vertical. This cast shadow seems to be slightly too angled. So now I'm reassessing some of the decisions that I made earlier and trying to make sure that before I start putting any value down, that I have a decent representation of what I'm going to do. Cast shadows on the ground. And at this point, I'm ready to start doing the value. This is where we pick up some speed. So form shadows, the 2B. This one gets a little darker. a little lighter here, a little darker here, just a little bit. The blending stump will take care of this value. We just got to make sure that this front face is going to be lighter. All of this area that we designated to be form shadow on the sphere. And with this, we're just keeping big shapes of general value. We don't have to get too particular with the details. We'll do that in the next drawing. The top of these are getting shadow. Cast shadow on this. And as you're doing this, kind of be mindful of what areas are darker on the forms. Right? So this one, since it's further away from the light, is going to be darker than anything closer to the light, and there might be areas that get half lights. So in this case, this side of this box is the darkest. The top side is a little lighter, but darker than this side here on this pyramid. And then we can go into cast shadows. So this here, I like to define it with the pitch shadow so that I know what I'm looking at. Pitch shadow is where there's no light at all, and that creates this kind of dark line. There should be a pitch shadow here. It's also called the occlusion. But this would be the darker area. And you see a little bit of the side of this pyramid. Just going to give just a sliver of that. And the cast shadow. So in this case, this cast shadow is a little lighter, so I'm going to switch to a 2B so that I use the 6B on this side here because it's going to be darker, right? So I compare. If this is going to be darker, then I need to make sure that I use a darker value pencil, or a pencil that's softer so that it gives me more material to work with, thereby darkening the surface. This area also gets darker, but the rest of it I'll do with the 2B to maintain that lighter value relationship. When I'm doing the walls or a table or something like that, I like to keep the marks pretty consistent so that it gives the illusion that they're flat, right? I want to follow the greater perspective on the objects, but when I'm painting shadows, I want to find a way to make the marks that I make have the illusion or appear to be flat. So these angles are a little tricky to do that way, but first do the angle and then I move up and down vertically. see here. And it seems like this area here, it's dark. So I'm gonna give it a little bit of value. That'll help with the white of the front of this prism to be more visible. Now I can start putting that. I'll come back with the eraser and clean up some of this, and a ruler maybe, get some sharpness. But since this drawing is working on the bigger shapes of value, getting into the rendering aspects, or being very particular about the nuanced shifts in value is not as important as it will be in the next set of drawings that we'll do. In this, when I'm doing a sphere, I want to kind of follow that as I'm making that shape. If I'm doing a shadow, I actually want to try to make it look flat. So the way that you push the value around becomes important. I like to approach value this way when we're starting out, so that you get results faster. But you can completely just use an additive process where you're just making hatching marks, and those hatch marks develop into value and subtle value differences. It's more time consuming that way. It can have really beautiful effects. So it then becomes a matter of choice. So what we're trying to do right now is just build technical skills quickly, get us to be able to see these objects clearly, and then make subtle distinctions between light mass, shadow mass, and cast shadows. The smaller portions, reflected light, shadow core, those things we'll leave for the next assignment.